It's so much easier nowadays because we have multi-track recording, and you can isolate things and you can overdub things, you can tune things. Back then, in order to be an artist, back in the era of people like George Jones, in order to be an artist, you had to be able to like sing like you were singing a hit record from start to finish, all the way through every take. And the musicians had to be able to play that way too. There was no like, oh, can you punch me in on the halfway point in the solo? It's like, no, man, that's it. It all, went down to, one track, and they were all in one room with everybody was bleeding onto each other's mics with their sound. And I think that because of that, the musicians, not to say that, I think that the musicians now are more sophisticated in Nashville as far as like the variety of styles that they can cover, and maybe they're more schooled in a traditional sense. Although I will say that those players back then, a lot of them, when they got together for fun, they would play jazz. They were country players, but if they were just getting together to pick, they wanted to play, jazz or their version of jazz. Sometimes Western swing, if it was the older generation of guys. But there was something about the way that they could just go in and record a record in 2 hours. And you were saying to me a little while ago, there's this one in particular, it's a George Jones record of Hank Williams songs that they did in like 2 hours. And it helps too when you already know the material. I'm sure all of them had come up, playing in honky tonks, playing those songs. And if Tommy Jackson was playing fiddle on it, well, he played on Hank Williams records, But yeah, there's, we'll spend 2 hours now. I remember reading a thing. It's in Keith Richards' biography. He's complaining about modern recording. And he says, yeah, we made the last Stones record, and, we spent like 6 days just getting a drum sound. And it still didn't sound right. Like in 1963, they'd take one microphone and spend 5 minutes getting a drum sound, and it sounded better than what we get now. What's the deal with that? And I kind of tend to agree with that, I think using one microphone too, the drums get treated as one instrument instead of boom, 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 like these separate sounds just coming at you with their own mics and their own EQ and their own, preamps. And there's something about just treating it like one instrument. But that also meant that the drummers back then had to be better because they had to know how to mix themselves. They had to know, like you play at what sounds like a normal volume for a stage drummer, and then you record that with one microphone and the cymbals are too loud. You've got to know how to play really soft on the cymbals and hit the snare a little harder. And then when you play your fill, you got to know, well, I need to hit the rack tom a little harder than I do the floor tom, or maybe the other way around. There's just those little things about how to mix your volume in real time while you play. And that's the same too with guitar players back then. They didn't have a lot of EQ on the engineer's side. So you had to know like how to play your guitar, like what angle to hold your pick at, to move it closer to the bridge or to the neck, just little things like that. Just to give the engineers or they would move the mic like, oh, it sounds too bassy. We'll move the mic a little farther that way. Instead, nowadays they just, adjust it on a computer screen. But back then it was much more organic, and it's amazing, that they not only made records that sounded that good, but they made so many of them, that those guys worked so much, the session musicians, and that the artists could go in and sing a record in 2 hours time and then just, onto the next thing.